Welcome to Malmesbury Abbey. My name is Tony McAleavy and I'm a historian with a particular interest in medieval Malmesbury. So who was Athelstan and why is he important? Well, he grew up before England was a single kingdom, when it was basically divided into three: Wessex in the south, Mercia in the Midlands and Northumbria covering the north. In 924, exactly 1100 years ago, he became King of Wessex and Mercia. And he was the son of Edward the Elder, who'd controlled Wessex and Mercia for the previous 25 years. And he was the grandson of Alfred the Great, who of course turned the tide in the fight against the Vikings in the late 9th century. Athelstan was probably born around 894, making him about 30 years old when he first became king. During his reign, Athelstan was the first English king who ruled over the whole of the land that's known today as England. And he achieved this through a combination of diplomacy and military strength. In 924, the kingdom of the Northumbrians was ruled from York by a Danish king called Sitric. But when Sitric died in 927, Athelstan marched north and seized control of Northumbria, making him king of all the English and the most powerful ruler in all Britain. Athelstan's authority was challenged in 937 by an alliance of Scottish and Danish forces, and he engaged in a battle with his enemies at a place called Brunanburh, somewhere in northern England. It's entirely possible that men from Malmesbury were present at this historic encounter. At the Battle of Brunanburh, Athelstan was triumphant, inflicting heavy losses on his enemies. And his great victory was celebrated at the time by an extraordinary entry in the annals of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. So here we are next to the tomb of Athelstan, first king of all England, who died in 939. While he was alive, he ordered that his body should be brought here after his death. Now the tomb you see today is much later than that. It was built by the monks of the abbey in about 1400. And sadly the tomb is empty, and it's a bit of a mystery what happened to the skeleton of the king. Perhaps we'll find it one day buried somewhere in the abbey grounds. During the English Civil War, parliamentary soldiers broke into the abbey and decapitated the head of poor old Athelstan, and they threw the head away. After they're gone, the people of the town, who were incensed by this act of vandalism, paid for a new head, and that was reinstated on the effigy. And if you look very, very carefully at the statue in front of us, you can just about see the join where they stuck the new head on. One man who did see the body of Athelstan was the historian William of Malmesbury, who lived in the early 12th century, and he was present when the tomb of the time was opened. And you've got to remember that this was 200 years after Athelstan's death. But William reported that his fair hair was still clearly visible. He said it was beautifully intertwined with threads of golden fabric. In this year, King Athelstan, the lord and ring-giver of warriors, together with his brother Prince Edmund, achieved everlasting glory in battle near Brunanburh. They smashed and hacked through the enemy's wooden shield wall. As sons of King Edward, success in war came naturally to them. All day long, the West Saxons with their mounted troops pressed against the foe. The enemy was destroyed. Those who tried to flee were cut down from behind. The field of battle turned dark with their blood. And so, Athelstan and Edmund, king and prince, brothers together, returned to the land of Wessex, exultant and triumphant. They left their enemies as carrion for the black raven, the grey eagle, the greedy hawk, and the wolves from the nearby forests. Never before on this island of Britain was there greater slaughter of people cut down by the sword's edge. Athelstan lived for 2 more years after the Battle of Brunanburh. He left instructions that he should be buried here. On one level, it's surprising that Athelstan chose Malmesbury as his last resting place, because traditionally the kings of Wessex were always buried in Winchester Cathedral. So why here? Well, it's quite complicated, and there are probably several reasons. Athelstan was very proud of his family connection with St. Aldhelm, who died in about 710 and was also buried here. Athelstan was extremely religious, and he was intensely devoted to the veneration of this particular saint. He wanted his own body to be laid to rest next to his powerful patron saint. According to William of Malmesbury, Athelstan also thought that he owed his victory at the Great Battle of Brunanburh to the miraculous intervention of St. Aldhelm. Another tradition in the Middle Ages was that Athelstan loved Malmesbury because of the debt he owed to the men of the town for their service in his wars against the Danes. And it's also possible that Athelstan liked the idea of Malmesbury because it had connections both with Wessex and Mercia and stood on the frontier between these two historic kingdoms. So to conclude, in choosing to be buried in Malmesbury, I'm sure that Athelstan was sending out a message that he wanted to be a king for all the English.